Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, second part, third part thereof for the 27th of March 2024. There's so much happening, too much content, too much news. Sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry. It is what it is. You don't have to watch everything. Okay, we'll start with Hungary. A lot going on with regard to the political situation in Budapest. But before we get there, Hungary will help Ukraine with DNA examinations of the war dead. According to their national police, this agreement was reached during a meeting between the head of the National Police of Ukraine, Ivan Vyhivsky, and his Hungarian counterpart, János Baloch. Good stuff that Hungary are going to help in that way. But I think, goodness me, there's some massively important stuff going on in Budapest at the moment. So thousands of Hungarian protests against Orbán following a corruption leak scandal. So this chap, is it Peter Magyar, which basically means Peter Hungarian. I reported recently he announced that there was going to be a big scandal breaking as he was going to have a leak coming out, and that's now come out. And as a result, thousands of people have gathered near the Hungarian parliament in Budapest yesterday, calling for the resignation of the chief prosecutor and the Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. I mean, this is huge. Exactly what I would like, because I believe that Viktor Orbán is authoritarian, quasi-dictator, or a dictator wannabe. So on and so forth. Large protests have broken out in Hungary to demand Viktor Orbán's resignation after the recording was released of his government engaging in bribery and covering up corruption. Now, let's read through this news article just to get you up to date on who this chap is and what has happened. Thousands protest in Budapest as Orbán is embroiled in a corruption cover-up. Authoritarian social conservative Viktor Orbán has already had his power shaken by a sexual abuse scandal. Thousands took to the streets of Budapest to protest after a former government insider turned critic released an audio recording embroiling top officials in Hungary in a conspiracy to cover up corruption. Peter Magyar, the ex-husband of Justice Minister Judit Varga, has released an audio recording featuring what appears to be Varga's voice, describing how other government officials caused evidence to be removed from court records to cover up their roles in corrupt business dealings. So, ouch, this is going to be painful for him and his former wife there, as he's releasing a recording of her. Now, he used to be in Fidesz in the government as well, Peter Magyar, but he's come out against them and has this audio recording that very clearly, I think, shows corruption taking place. On Tuesday morning, he published a recording on Facebook and YouTube. Quote, they suggested to the prosecutors what should be removed, Varga says in a recording which Magyar says he made during a conversation in the former couple's apartment. He has given a tape to the public prosecutor's office in Budapest to be used as evidence. In a Facebook post on Tuesday, Varga confirmed the voice on the recording is hers, but accused Magyar of violence towards her during their marriage and claimed she had made the statements under duress. I can't speak to the accuracy of what she is claiming, and I wouldn't want to belittle anyone accusing a spouse of domestic violence. However, there is a somewhat convenient. I mean, they've got to somehow say that isn't true. So how would you, like, if I was employed in PR for the government, it'd be like, right, how can we make this? This is your voice. This was said. How can we make this not true? So somehow you must have been lying. Why would you be lying? Why would you lie to your husband? That doesn't make you look like just basically a frivolous liar. Okay, you had to be lying under duress. Why would you be lying under duress? Because he's physically violent. So you can see how that would come about, right? Okay, quote, I said what he wanted to hear, so I could get away as soon as possible, she wrote. In a situation like this, any person can say things that they don't mean in a state of intimidation. Magyar subsequently denied her claims in a Facebook post of his own. The country's largest protests in years erupted in early February after it was revealed that the president had issued a pardon to a man imprisoned for covering up incidents of child sexual abuse perpetrated by the director of a state-run orphanage. Close Orban allies, including the president and Justice Minister Judith Varga, were forced to resign in the face of public outrage. Switching sides. So, once a senior but little known member of Orban's political circle, Magyar shot to prominence when he gave an interview in February to popular YouTube channel Partizan, where he accused Orban's government of widespread corruption and using smear campaigns to discredit its opponents. On March 15th, he addressed a crowd of tens of thousands in Budapest, where he announced plans to form a new political party to challenge Fidesz's 14-year grip on power as an alternative to Hungary's fragmented opposition. The scandal caused an unprecedented political crisis within Orban's government, which has led Hungary since 2010. Magyar's followers hope his position as a former insider can help to disrupt Hungary's political system, which many see as deeply entrenched autocracy. The government has dismissed him as an opportunist seeking to forge a new career after his divorce from Varga and his loss of positions in several state companies. Nonetheless, Magyar's rise has seriously exacerbated what were already major political headaches. Magyar has railed against official corruption, accusing Orban of overseeing a nepotistic system of oligarchs that enrich themselves through unfairly awarded government contracts. I mean, completely par for the course, right, in authoritarian regimes. He has particularly targeted Antal Rogan, a close Orban ally who is responsible for the government's communications, as well as the country's secret services. The recording, released Tuesday, purports to show that Rogan led the effort to alter evidence. So, War Translated says Viktor Orban is under fire in corruption scandal again, as thousands come out on Tuesday demanding the Hungarian Prime Minister to resign. He says, we watch closely as we believe in the will and fairness of the Hungarian people, tired of 14 years of Fidesz, the ruling party, being in power. What I think is, where did someone say something about this? It was Jay in Kiev was saying, I'll find this because I think it's an important observation. Yeah, this is it. And I was thinking about this exactly myself last night. So, to maintain the degree of control that Orban now has in Hungary will require assassinations, not just the imprisoning of opponents. This is the line and the brand of power that Europeans won't stand for, the line he'll soon be forced to cross with Russian help. And it's the end. Right. So, imagine you are Viktor Orban and his party that is used to authoritarian control and control of the media, the political institutions, the judiciary, all the things that have been criticised, Hungary being criticised over, and in fact why the EU is withholding funding to Hungary, because they have been democratically backsliding. And then you've got someone coming out with evidence for this corruption that you're involved in, and he's then whipping up a storm in terms of public sentiments against your government. What do you do? Do you just, as an authoritarian, do you just, okay, let's go to elections and have a free and fair election, or do you do things to maintain your control that continues the trajectory that you're already on? Where does this place you in terms of the EU if you're going to continue on that, and actually that will be expedited, so you'll move even further towards authoritarianism? Then how does that play with NATO? How does that play with the general public as well? And like, this is going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how Viktor Orban responds. It's highly likely that he's going to do something to silence this, something in his authoritarian nature. To shut down. Will it be an assassination? Will it be an imprisonment? But then what will that do in terms of public support for Fidesz and international support of Hungary? He's at a very interesting crossroads right now, and I think this is really good for democracy and for Ukraine if Orban is fundamentally challenged and if Hungary can throw off the shackles of Russian influence. This is super important. Let's keep an eye on this going forward. Right. Also, just next door, we have Serbia boiling away. So Serbia's president has said his country's vital national interests were threatened. So he came out against Russian, I guess, not dissidents, but people who have escaped from Russia because of the war. A lot of them came to Serbia, but not all of them are massive fans of Putin and the war. And so he's then been threatening to clamp down on, because they'll go to Serbia because Serbia is in the Russian sphere of influence. So it's kind of Russian home from home in a sense. But he's then said, right, I'm going to clamp down on Russians who are working not on our national interest. So he's trying to toe this kind of Kremlin party line here. He's then come out and said, quote, it's not easy for me now to say what news we have received in the last 48 hours. In the coming days, I will familiarize the people of Serbia with all the challenges ahead of us. In other words, expect a massive 2-day or a massive, in 2 days, a massive propaganda campaign, a massive pro-Russian propaganda campaign that will try and manipulate the general public. He says it will be harder than ever. We will fight, Serbia will win, or translated, Russia will win. He's not specified exactly what he's talking about, but that's what he's written on social media. Again, watch this space. Now, here we have NATO. No, sorry, not NATO. It's the Swedish. It's Billstrom, who is he said in order to stop Russia, we first of all have to stop the aggression against Ukraine. Not all countries understand the sense of urgency to act that there is. Those countries need to understand that the conflict is here. Like I've said many times before, there are people within Europe who are properly recognizing the importance of what is taking place in Ukraine. People like Macron, people like the Baltic nations and the Nordic nations. This is Sweden's foreign minister, Tobias Billström, saying, we've got to wake up, guys. This is incredibly important. We have to, and this is the important line that people have been reporting recently, quote, we have to create more strategic difficulties for Russia. Now, quite what that means, what that looks like, I don't know. But you've got Sweden and NATO and other nations like, as I said, Macron, starting to really pick up this momentum in terms of being much more explicit in support for Ukraine and much more explicit in the idea that Russia are the enemy of Europe, the enemy of the West. Okay, at the same time, here we've got Matthew Miller, spokesperson for the US Department of State, saying that, quote, our position from the very beginning of the war has always been that we do not encourage or support strikes by Ukraine outside its territory. In other words, strikes into Russia. This was clearly communicated to the Ukrainian partners, exclamation mark. Well, of course, he said that. That's the interpretation. Now, I have huge problems with this, as you can imagine. My analogy is this. I have a house. Some yobs are throwing bricks into my windows and they're outside my properties. And apparently all I can do is try and catch the bricks as they come in or shoot at the bricks as they're flying through the air as they're over my property. But I can't do anything about the people throwing bricks. So I have to just sit and let people throw bricks at my house. Nothing I can do about them actually doing the throwing. Of course, that's nonsense. I walk out of my front door, I walk down out across my drive, and I approach them and I challenge them on throwing those bricks, or I physically restrain them from throwing those bricks. To not allow me to do that is to give all the power to the brick thrower and to not allow me to actually defend my property. It's ridiculous. So, as Noel Report says here, hypocrite and misplaced. What will the US do when they think it has to protect its own? I mean, look at what the US has done in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in all over the world. And now we've got an actual war. So this isn't some clandestine activity taking place. This is an actual war where Ukraine are being invaded, and they can't do anything about the invading force from the neighbouring country from which they're launching stuff. It's insane. So what will the US do when they think it has to protect its own international interests in case of war? Exactly. It will bomb anywhere it thinks it's necessary to achieve that goal. By limiting Ukraine to this mindset, which in their case only applies to Russian territory, keeps the Russian war machine running. In order to shut Russia down, their military industrial industry, military sites, air bases and other war-related infrastructure has to be destroyed. Just as Russia is already trying to do that and has been doing that for over 2 years to Ukraine and in Ukraine without any rules. Do you want Ukraine really to win? Stop setting limits. Putin has no rules, nor should the West have in terms of striking war-related objects inside Russia. What you are asking now is Ukraine to win a war with hands tied behind its backs. Like, I would love this guy. I know I really should listen to the rationale he has for saying stuff like that, if indeed he said that. Honestly, Matthew Miller and the Biden administration, if this is the official administration line, we've got some issues. John Cleese here, actor and comedian, famously of Monty Python, etc., etc., talks about Trump's former Navy Secretary, Richard Spencer, who's come out to say Trump has very little understanding of what it means to be in the military, to fight ethically, or to be governed by a uniform set of rules and practices. John Cleese says, but the MAGA supporters think he'll be very good at defending America despite this. For example, they like him for supporting Russia against Ukraine, because the Democrats are on Ukraine's side. Patriots, eh? This idea that I think this is a really good explanation for the positioning of so many MAGA Republicans. It's like Ukraine has become a partisan thing. Ukraine is a Democrat thing, so therefore we can't support Ukraine because Biden supports Ukraine. And it's the hatred of Biden, the hatred of Democrats, means that you can't ever do anything bipartisan. There can't ever be any agreement between the parties. So if Biden is completely right on something, they by default have to take the incorrect position. So like, that's what you say. Well, we'll say the opposite. Yeah, but like what I'm saying is obviously true. Yeah, but you know, you're a Democrat, so yeah. And I think that's so challenging. The other thing that's worth noting is it's something like 40 out of 44 people that were around Trump while he was president. So his cabinet, people around him, his advisors and aides, 40 out of 44 of them have refused to endorse him. If you need to know anything about whether he will be a good president from 2024, November 2024, January 2025 onwards, look at that. 40 out of the 44 of the people that were in his administration do not endorse him. Say he is not good for the US. And they should know. They should know. Right, Zelensky's met with a delegation of the Parliament of Estonia. We discussed further assistance to Ukraine from Estonia and other partners, progress in the preparation of a bilateral security agreement. Separately, also talked about the use of Russian frozen assets. Obviously, the Baltic states are super supportive of Ukraine. Poland allows sanctioned Belarusian timber into EU with forged documents, according to an investigation. Journalists have discovered documents showing Belarus companies using Poland to bypass EU sanctions, falsifying records to pass off Belarusian timber as coming from Kazakhstan. Hopefully something gets done about that, but I'm sure that's a sort of activity that's taking place widely. Okay. Exclusive. Russia struggles to collect oil payments as China, UAE, Turkey raise bank scrutinies. This is another example of how Russia are going to struggle going forward in terms of prosecuting the war and by funding the war. Here we have more examples of sanctions biting. Several banks in China, the UAE and Turkey have boosted their sanctions compliance requirements in recent weeks. Again, I talked about this previously, about how the US and other nations do things behind the scenes that aren't necessarily going to show up on military aid spreadsheets, right? Okay, the US are 31st on the list of donors to Ukraine for military aid when taken as a percentage of GDP. Okay, that doesn't look too good, but they have given a load of stuff. But also, aside from that, the US are doing loads of things that are massively important that we don't really recognize. The turning the screw in terms of sanctions, the diplomacy that is securing support for Ukraine from neutral nations or nations that otherwise sit on the fence or whatever. You know, there is so much that the US is doing behind the scenes that we must recognize. But anyway, the sanctions compliance requirements in recent weeks has resulted in delays or even the rejection of money transfers to Moscow, according to 8 banking and trading sources. Banks cautious of the US secondary sanctions started to ask their clients to provide written guarantees that no person or entity from the US SDN Special Designated Nationals list is involved in a deal or is a beneficiary of a payment. So anyway, that's really good news, and well done on the US for that. Fearing reprisals, Turkmenistan is repatriating students in Russia after terror attacks. So this is where ethnic minorities are getting a lot of pushback due to people being taking law into their own hands, or basically being discriminatory against those who they think are more likely to commit terrorist atrocities. Bloomberg is reporting that Macron is seeking to convince Lula, so this is the Brazilian president at the moment, who is a little bit sitting on the fence. At the end of the day, Brazil are part of BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But actually, Macron is visiting Brazil and is going to be talking about Ukraine. He's seeking to convince his Brazilian counterpart, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, to support Ukraine during his trip, according to Bloomberg. And also, he's made a statement about the possible deployment of troops to Ukraine recently, and that has angered American officials, who said on condition of anonymity that such a move could lead to the risk of a clash with Moscow. I really support his move there, Macron's, and I don't think he should have been reprimanded, and I don't think, this is, at the end of the day, France qua Europe standing up and saying we are independent of the US, and if the US want to have a whinge at us for being strong and not setting our own red lines and constraining our behavior going forward, we need to step away from the US. And if you're gonna reprimand us for that, screw you. Yeah. I was just gonna go into Monty Python there. Oh, I'll do it. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelled of elderberries. Now go away, or I will taunt you a second time. And that was indeed John Cleese doing that. Already mentioned him. So that was Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Of course, that's what Emmanuel Macron could say to the Americans, if he was so inclined. Right, the UK military couldn't fight Russia for longer than 2 months, according to the Daily Telegraph, according to Lieutenant General Sir Rob McGowan. They would have to manage the operational risk that came with not having the resources he would like in future wars. There are criticisms the UK couldn't fight Russia, and we wouldn't last 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever. But you've got to remember, that's the entire point of having NATO. That's the entire point of having an alliance. It means that you can spread the defensive work across all the alliance members, so that you don't have to spend that much money on a massive army, navy, and air force, and you can spend on hospitals and other things and welfare state, right? Russia doesn't have that, doesn't have an alliance, really. I mean, you can talk about CTSO and whatever, but or CSTO, whatever. They have a huge army that they spend money on themselves, and they have an absolutely rubbish welfare system and an oligarchy that squanders money left, right, and centre. Okay, whatever. But what you do with alliances is say, right, rather than each of our individual countries having to be able on their own to withstand a Russian attack, together, now 31 of us, we all together withstand a Russian attack. So one of us gets attacked, we all get attacked. And so we're all in this together. So I don't need an army. So we don't need an army that needs to withstand the Russians for more than 2 months. Now the question is, do we need more of an army anyway? Well, I would say yes, it's been grossly underfunded. So we can argue about 2 months. Should it be 4 months or 6 months or a year? Okay. But the principle is, it's about communicating the value of alliances there. I haven't read the article, but I would hope it would at least tip its hat to NATO and the fact that Article 5 is the reason we don't have a massive army, and nor do we need one, but we may well need a slightly larger one than we've got. Okay. Google Play has blocked applications through which the Russian payment system Mir can be used. The following apps have disappeared from the App Store: Mir Pay, SB Pay, and Hello Mir. This is again influence. You could say this is a private corporation doing this, Google. But I assure you that the American administration, the American government, will have something to do with this again. So as much as I criticize Congress for not passing things, there are, like I've said repeatedly, there will be ways that the US is trying to compensate for the impasse in Congress by getting stuff done outside of that, by making sure that the rules they do have in place in terms of sanctions are being adhered to by entities that are either directly under their control, like Google Play, Google, or entities that aren't directly under their control. So talk about the banks in UAE and China and India, but that will get secondary sanctions through entities within the US control. So US does an awful lot that we don't recognize, and good on you. But Congress needs to sort itself out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.